Welcome to all of you. Welcome to Mr. J. Panda, all the dignitaries, representatives from multiple organizations who are contributing in policy making and implementation in the field of education. Um, there are a couple of things that I want to talk, and I will keep it as brief, as short as possible. Before we invite Mr. J. Panda to deliver the keynote address. This is the 12th edition of the School Choice National Conference, and we have been working and talking about certain ideas for a long time. We also have occasional success, but multiple defeats also, as we realize these ideas we are working on, these are difficult to find a place, but nonetheless very important. Basically today, I want all of you to connect with the idea of Viksit Bharat that our Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji has been talking. And I think that this idea of Viksit Bharat is so important. And we are at the cusp of time where this is do or die. Now, why is that? When we think of Viksit Bharat, what do we think about? It's basically our aspiration to grow up and find a place with the developed nations. But when we think about it, think about the enormous task that we have taken upon ourselves. One is the moment you think about the developed nations, you will think about their per capita income. And the day before I was in Lucknow, where Uttar Pradesh Education Department was also holding a consultation, and their idea was that if India has to become Viksit Bharat, Uttar Pradesh too has become Viksit Uttar Pradesh. And they have took up the challenge to make it $6 trillion economy alone for UP. And therefore they were thinking about how education should be placed in this context. And while I was so glad to talk about things that they are doing, there are a couple of things we need to think about from a nation as a whole. So number one is, if you think about the League of Developed Nations, and broadly they were comparing India with OECD countries. And if you look at OECD's countries per capita income, it will range something between 20,000 US dollar to 140,000 US dollars. What is India's per capita income? It is roughly 2,500 US dollars. And we have this enormous task to achieve this goal by 2047, roughly 2 decades. Is it possible? I will say it is very difficult. However, yes, it is possible. Now, how it can be made possible? It's simple. We require our economy to grow in double digit. We require high rate of economic growth. And that can be done. How it can be done? This will require a series of reforms, but that is the aspiration we should be talking about. Now, in this case, we know that now we live in a very uncertain world. The economy, the way it has shaped today, it was hard to imagine 2 decades ago, and therefore can we imagine the life and economy and society 2 decades after? It's difficult. However, there are few things that we can predict and know. And one of the most important thing, and therefore the idea of Viksit Bharat has to be put in this context, is our demographic changes that is going to occur. One is, we know that India has become the most populated country. We have surpassed China, right? But this growth is not going to continue for very long. The prediction is that by 2040, it will start plateauing and thereafter also declining. What does it mean? Why I'm talking about demographic challenges in an education conference? Because we need to know that this demographic dividend we have been long talking about, it is now short-lived. We have now come to a point whether we have to address the challenges or the advantages will be gone, and gone most likely for our lifetime. I don't know whether this wonderful opportunity will come. Sometimes I wonder, Maybe this is the reason why our Honorable Prime Minister talks about this era as the Amrit Kal, Azadi ka Amrit Kal, because these 20 years going to be so important. Now, in this case, with the change in demography, what is going to happen is that we will have lesser younger working population and a bigger population of people who would require care, right? So we have lesser number of people who are workforce, and they will have the task, challenge to deliver the high rate of economic growth to meet the aspiration. And please think about it. The human capital we envision who would be leading our 2040 reform Viksit Bharat is sitting in classroom today. Once again, let me repeat. The people who we are expecting will lead the agenda of Viksit Bharat. 20 years down the line, they are in grade 1 sitting in our classroom today. And therefore, all the reform ideas, it's very important now, it is urgent that it is done today, or we will miss the idea of Viksit Bharat. Now, when we think about education, there are once again couple of things we know, and I know majority of people here are quite educated on the subject, and therefore I'm not going to touch too much of data, but we know that roughly 50% of students are now enrolled in private schools, right? And why it has happened? It has basically happened by and large because now people have more purchasing power, higher aspiration, all of that is linked with 1991 reforms, right? So as people have aspiration, purchasing power, they are looking for better quality of education, they are voting with their feet, their choice, and the only aspiration today, even if you talk to an auto driver, he will say, I would eat one lesser meal, but I will send my kid to a good school, right? That's the level of aspiration. But we know the quality has been a major concern, and India is facing a learning crisis. There are reports after reports, whether it is ASER, which is produced by Pratham, a not-for-profit organization, whether it is NAS, now which is called Parakh, which is by NCERT, or many other international agencies, something like PISA. We know all of those are indicating that India is going through a deep learning crisis, and unless this is addressed right now, not much can happen. We also know if this simple high rate of economic growth we achieve, which means, and we follow the trend, the private school enrollment in next 10 years and 20 years could range between 60 to 70%. And therefore, the entire policy perspective now have to shift and change and see, while this sector is growing, what kind of mechanism we are putting at place, which ensures quality standards and ensures that schools are performing, accountable, delivering what is best needed to the students. India, long we have been talking about whenever there is a policy conversation that we have to ensure access and equity, but now I think it's also high time that we start talking about efficiency, quality, specialization, something similar to what actually NEP has talked. NEP has talked about bringing access, inclusion, accountability, and affordability. They have thought it as a 5 key pillars for education reforms. And in this case, we need to think about how we can address this problem. So far, I basically only talked about the big challenge we have taken on ourselves, the current reality, where things are likely to shift, but what can be done? Broadly speaking, there are 2-3 things that, in our opinion, requires urgent need. One is basically, if we understand, there is a huge gap of good schools, the supply of good schools. Why? We know there are multiple barriers, including financial barriers, people who want to contribute into this, but something greatly which is emphasized and has come out in multiple reports is regulatory environment. And therefore, we envision the deregulation, so allowing more people to come and open and set up schools of their choice and participate in this journey of Viksit Bharat. In one of the reports, actually, it came out that in India you require 100 plus licenses, permit, NOC or papers, documents, some of the different kind to set up a school. And it was also starkly presented in one report that it is easier to set up a liquor shop compared to a school where there are people, many motivated people who want to contribute in education reforms to meet this goal. So one key idea is the deregulation of the way education system is designed to fast meet the pace. The second is, in this case, as I briefly talked about what trends look like, there will be many people, many students, many parents for whom affordability will be one issue. So only addressing the supply side of education system problem is not going to be sufficient. We also have to think about the economically weaker section students and how their aspiration and demand is met, for which now government with multiple schemes have prioritized direct benefit transfer. We can also imagine if the state would like to finance such kids to be able to afford good quality of education, and that too of their choice. The third is the system. This is how you would address the problem of supply and demand, but supply and demand also happens in a good regulatory environment. In this case, NEP, and specifically I would like to get attention to the Chapter 8 recommendation, where it is talking about setting up a state school standard authority, which will regulate all schools, irrespective whether they are government, private, aided, missionaries, whatever. So all have to be regulated. Regulated on what basis? Regulated on the basis of learning outcomes. And therefore, this body should ensure that there is competency based, not, so Gurcharan Das has pointed out, one of the problem we are facing is rote based learning. So India is producing, not India, and it's also a problem for many other societies in geography, is that we are producing a nation of parrots. We need to shift towards competency based assessment, and therefore assessment reforms need to take place. Imagine the reports which have NASSR, which have pointed out about the learning crisis. They give data, something like this, that roughly 60% of say 6th grade students cannot do basic of numeracy and language of grade 2. And if you realize that at grade 8 and 9 level, by the time you have actually, there is an irreversible damage that has happened to the life of the kid. Now, exceptionally, only this guy would find a better future, and it may find future for many other reasons, but certainly not for what he spent time going to school. And therefore, foundational literacy becomes an important area. We are so glad that government also has prioritized and working in a mission mode. But this would require to be coupled with what we call competency-based assessment. And when this assessment happens, actually all these data has to go in public. And therefore, public disclosure of school standards, school accreditation, learning assessment needs to be out in public to empower parents, who then will become the inspector and make sure the school is delivering what they have promised, right? Otherwise, it doesn't happen. So what needs to be done by state school standard is basically 4 things: accreditation of schools, learning assessment of all students, public disclosure, and with public disclosure will come a grievance redressal mechanism, because sure, there many people will have multiple of grievances to make, and therefore they should become the part of the monitoring system. Not state and agencies alone may not be sufficient to do this. Now, such kind of reforms have been undertaken at multiple places. Maybe those South Korea, Vietnam, Poland, etc., to be some of those. I have been given the time up thing, so let me fast conclude. Ladies and gentlemen, I think if India has to achieve the dream of Viksit Bharat, we must recognize that human capital is the true currency of growth. Roads, ports, factories, and digital infrastructure all are vital, but they will take us only halfway. A nation becomes developed not only by the abundance of its resources, but the capabilities of its people. Our children are our greatest asset. The India of 2047 will be built by the minds we nurture today. Let us therefore commit ourselves to radically reform, guided by evidence, powered by innovation, anchored in equity, and driven by a belief that every child's potential is a national resource. The journey is long, but the destination is worthy, and if we act boldly today, India will not just become richer, it will become stronger, fairer, truly Viksit, and what I call prosperous Bharat. Thank you very much.